80% of the world's climate challenges today stemmed from the design phase of a product or a service, right? We're building things without the recognition of the impact of the things we're building. Creativity forces us to slow down and solve problems. We want to create a better environment, a better planet for humanity, not a worse one, not a dystopian one. 96% of kids believe they're creative, only 26% of adults agree with that. So somewhere along the way, we lose that. For me, it comes down to... Thanks for having me. My name is Ben. I call myself a designer. That has been my job for the best part of a decade. But it's also mixed with a bit of an entrepreneurial background and spirit of trying to build a business that solves complex problems and challenges. So we started our business in 2009 as an advisory consultancy firm, wanting to be the next IDEO. With this business, when I started it, I didn't really understand exactly what we wanted to be. I was a little bit rudderless, which might form a bit of this conversation later. As we headed down this journey, we found ourselves in big environments like big banks, big brands, big clients. And for me, that was a really challenging place because I never pictured myself having the ability to be in those rooms and to be that guy that solved big problems. So that caused a lot of reflection and trying to understand how we got there and who I wanted to be as we built out this business. So that was 2009. We're down 2025. So it's 19, almost 20 years of having this agency. Or 15, was that 16 years? How's my maths? I've got to work on that. The thing that's led me to this point is systems. I'm interested in systems, systemic design. My work has been based around the idea of taking what was once graphic design, which became user experience design, into behavioral design, and now trying to understand the reimagination of human-centered design and trying to understand where do we sit in terms of making and creating things and what's the systemic impact of that. And on top of that, I'm a dad of 3, happily married, and I live south of Sydney in a really, really rainy town, about 400 meters of the beach, and I'm a surfer. I love to spend time in the ocean. So there's my 18-year history.
Man, you're so cool. Like long-running business, anything above 10 years is, anything above 5 years in the business is incredible. So tell me more about your book you recently launched. How long has it been out?
Recent. So 1st of May it came out, Lessons in Creativity.
Yeah. So your book, Lessons in Creativity, you try to focus in on something called the creativity gap. Ira Glass has a famous quote on it of how do you close the creativity gap? You have to, do a lot of bad work to develop your taste between idea and effective execution. What made you want to revisit this specific topic about creativity, like the creativity gap?
Yeah. That's so interesting. The Ira Glass quote is fascinating, and I love him. But I think the reason we don't do the bad work is because we're too scared to, right? We're too scared to fail or to look bad in a public environment. The thing that's interesting for me is this idea of being creative is inside all of us, but it's a choice. And the reason we choose sometimes not to do it, and when I talk about creativity gap, there's a statistic by Adobe that says 96% of kids believe they're creative, only 26% of adults agree with that. So somewhere along the way, we lose that. For me, it comes down to fear. It's this idea of looking bad. So whilst Ira Glass is absolutely correct in that sentence, the reason we're not repeatedly failing to get good at something is because of literally public shaming or this idea that I don't want to look bad in front of people. So, me and you are having a very public conversation, going to fit in people's cars, etc. That's scary for me. But at the same time, I've got to a point where I'm okay. I'm comfortable in the fear. And I like this idea that what we're doing now is having a conversation, which is a creative conversation. And in that conversation, I like to think that the fears, I'm nervous talking to you at the start, right? But now we're in it, the fear starts to dissipate. It starts to fade because now we're talking about something that I'm interested in and you're interested in. So all of a sudden, that's a creative process. So for me, the creativity gap in the middle is we've grown out of creative confidence and the belief that we are all creative. I spoke last night at a conference to 200 architects in Sydney, and it was incredible after how many people come up to me after and said, oh yeah, that's me. But you design houses and build houses and you're shaping cities. So you are inherently creatively confident. So why do you think it's not? It's because I had this idea to do X and I never did it. The idea for the book came off the back of that research by Adobe, but it's also that idea that when you get in the shower or you see the traffic lights and you face a problem that day or the day before and you know how to solve it and you're in the shower and you go, I want to do this tomorrow. I'm going to get up and start this thing. But then you tear yourself down and then you forget you had the answer to the problem and you get on with your day. And then 5 years passes. And the idea I wanted to do was write about what if we got out of the shower and started to solve the problem? What if we took accountability for it? And the way I had to do that was to go back and look at my own stories and try and understand what led me to here. And at the start, I said, I've got this business which has been going for 19 years. That doesn't come easy. That's ups and downs, a lot of fears, a lot of wins, a lot of fails. There's been points in my business where I've had 6 company cars on the lawn of my house with no staff to fill them because I had the loans on the cars, couldn't afford the staff. So there's periods in that journey that are terrifying and fractured and incredibly broken. But the reality is I'm okay. Like I'm here and we're talking. And I think that we've got to sort of be comfortable in the idea that it's not about conquering mountains. Sometimes it's conquering valleys too. You live in a beautiful part of Utah. It's a perfect metaphor for the highs and lows in the environment. And I think that we're not comfortable in the valleys. We're not comfortable in those troughs of setback and pain or whatever. And we need to be really uncomfortable in that space.
Yeah, I've realized that speaking of valleys, when I hear the word valley, I think about brain fog and the lack of inspiration and motivation to do something, and still forcing myself to do the work, even though I don't feel like it's going anywhere.
Mm.
You talk about systematic design. Do you mean the design of systems or being methodical when you're approaching a problem?
Yeah, good question. So there's a thing called human-centered design, right? Or design thinking, which is a process that was established by late 90s, early 2000s. And it's really important, human-centered design, and so is design thinking, process and a path to follow to all design is assumed, right? We're assuming we know what the outcome's going to be. So we're putting our mind into something. It's incredibly brave to design anything, but it's also really important. I think we gloss over the importance of how important design is. There's a statistic that says 80% of the world's climate challenges today stemmed from the design phase of a product or a service, right? We're building things without the recognition of the impact of the things we're building. So the idea of human-centered design, if we're designing for humans, which is what human-centered design is, we're designing for the people, then we're ignoring the person's behavior or the places in which humans operate or exist. And that's systems. So a good example of that, if we're designing for human convenience or human need, then we create things like single-use plastic, which is incredibly convenient for me and you, but incredibly inconvenient for humanity. So human-centered design creates this wonderful solution for us and our immediacy. So we're creating for now, but it ignores the future implications of those decisions. We have a problem with single-use plastic. It's everywhere. In Australia, we use paper straws and they're a nightmare. But the reason we use paper straws is because of the excess plastic in this country or in all countries, which is creating environmental challenges that are almost impossible to solve. Human decisions and systemic design is the ability to look into the future and understand the behaviors and what the implications would be.
Yeah, that quote that you made about most of climate change has to do with the design phase of creating any technology. I think there's one individual, I don't know the name, I might add it in post because I think it's such an interesting fact. Like the ozone problem in the 90s, hydrofluorocarbons came from one inventor who incorporated one piece of technology into refrigeration units. Once they found the root cause of what's generating these things, they just had to fix the design of fridges and we stopped the hole in the ozone from forming. He was also, I think, involved in like another, like humanity killing, like he was involved in, like with things that led to like 2 crises. But it's so true that a lot of, you think about like the very, I wouldn't say like greedy, like the 80s, like where that was seen as like time where business, it was all about finance, Wall Street, shareholder value was becoming a popular business term. And design wasn't an internal function of most businesses back then. It was usually just management. If they needed design, they would hire an external agency. A lot of single-use plastics and stuff, I bet, could be like tied to like the mid 19th century, where we just started optimizing for shareholder value creation, and we didn't actually consider capitalism. Yes, capitalism, and how a lot of the problems are caused because we didn't consider the human element in the design process.
Totally. It's 100% right. And I think when we measure success by money, then the values that are attached to the things we make are diluted. So it's interesting the amount of fashion brands that continue to evolve and grow and pop up out of nowhere. And we don't need more brands. We have enough. My wife and I made a stock company in the early 2000s, right at the start of COVID, which is probably the worst time to make anything. And we wanted to make the world's most sustainable snowboarding sock, right? And we did it. We built this beautiful, from recycled carpets. There's things when you go through the process to understand production and manufacturing, which we didn't understand until we went through this journey. We start to look at things like bamboo is a sustainable thing to grow, but it's not to break down and make into a material that we can wear. So there's also greenwashing in a sense of we're not really being educated into the right awareness of what is a good choice from a production point of view. What we learned through this process was there's versions of bamboo that now are good, but at the start, bamboo t-shirts were really bad. The water, it would take, I think it's 25,000 liters of water to make one t-shirt, but the amount of chemicals needed in the water to break down the bamboo was so significant that water could never be used again. So all of a sudden we're using a lot of water to create products that are sustainable, but they're actually not, because now there's a problem with water. For every opportunity, there's a problem, and we need to understand the systems in which they flow. If we don't use bamboo, what do we use, and how do we produce where we can, instead of discarding the water, how do we use that water again? So that journey for us took us to Spain. We found a factory in Spain that would use clean water, that would break down carpets. We would use wood pulp instead of bamboo because wood pulp was easy to break down. It didn't need chemicals. And we built this beautiful sock, which was relatively comfortable. I think as comfortable as any other sock, and made from pretty much the earth and discarded stuff in a way that was circular economy being really important. So I think what capitalism does in a way, it says we need socks and we need lots of them. And there's a commercial opportunity in that, which is why we got involved. I'm not pretending we didn't. We wanted to make a business that made money. But then you've got to attach that to a set of values to go, what do I want this to be remembered by? What is the thing that if we're starting this thing, the world doesn't need more sock, it needs a better sock. So what does a better sock look like? There's challenges with taking things that exist and repurposing those things for a better future. And I'm really interested in this idea of analog and touching and feeling things. And I don't know if you remember, Caden, that when we were younger, like we would have records and then those records became CDs. And we would get them out of a case and touch them and feel them. And this becomes really important because we're engaging inherently with the thing that someone made or designed. And that same process today is replaced by digital, and it's going in our ear. And we're listening to songs that we don't know who it's sung by, right? We don't actually know what the song is called, but we start to know the lyrics because we're hearing it and we like it. So that feeling of being in control of the process of design and creativity is gone through AI's recommendation of what it knows we need to listen to because we like it. And there's this amazing American singer who I love, and I think it's 5 songs deep. I said to my kids, who is this guy? Didn't know what he looked like, didn't know his album covers, didn't know he released albums. I just knew 6 of his songs word for word. Whereas that is problematic for me because I think the thing about opening, touching and feeling and reading an album cover, we get to know the person, the face, the human, and we give these things real accountability. That was someone like us who decided to go and write a song like Noah Khan did. And that's sort of fading a bit. So I think we're speeding things up. For me, systemic design or creativity forces us to slow down and solve problems. And that's what creativity is. It's the ability to go places we didn't need to go, to bring back things we didn't know we need, to then feel like we're accountable for it. And coming back to those 200 accountants in the room last night, you guys are rebuilding the cities. That's a pretty important job. What does the future of Australia look like because of your involvement? And I don't think we always think like that. It's sort of scary just to turn up and do the work. But I think we can do more than that. And Seth Godin talked about art being work and how do you share your art. I love that conversation so much.
Yeah, his book, The Dip, which is a really awesome short read, just talks about, he shows a graph of basically you start in the middle of like the y-axis, and then when you're getting started, it dips down, the line dips down, and then eventually your momentum back, and then the line goes back up and to the right, and then he just annotates that like dip part and says like anything worth doing is after the dip. It's the discouragement or the lack of enthusiasm after starting that if you just stick long enough, you'll eventually succeed. And he talked about companies intentionally putting dips in, like universities, how you doing the work to get a degree at Harvard signals that you sacrificed a lot. You got a lot of student debt too, potentially. In the Creative Act, I was thinking a lot. This is a technology podcast. I've been talking about AI with guests a lot lately.
Mm, I love that.
And what's scary for me is the fact, and like what's scaring everybody is we're like, okay, what does my job look like if the dip's gone from the actual getting started process? It's removed the dip a lot for writing documents, defining things, like necessary friction is being removed. And so there's less a consideration of like, hey, should I even be making this document in the first place? That's the scary part for product managers or designers thinking, do I have a job with AI? It's like, I'm going to just like think out loud and like go off a hunch, like connect my idea with your idea. Is that I think the scary part of like knowledge work, creating designs, requirements, strategy docs, the fact that like it's so easy and cheaper to generate decent artifacts nowadays, and it will get easier. The scary thing is now you have the time to do the work, and like you don't have any excuse to not be thoughtful now because of how fast it is to concept things and test things out. What do you think about that? It's like, because it resonates with me that, oh, now that like I can't hide behind, like if I'm not feeling good, I could hide behind meetings and memos in my job when I'm not feeling it. But now you don't really have an excuse to not be creative. And I think that's a daunting task because like, how do you feel?
Yeah. I think we need to be careful not to misunderstand creativity and AI. AI is not creative. AI is a tool.
Yeah.
I'm reading a lot that, that AI is, it's producing artwork and creativity and it does that. And that's really cool, but it doesn't replace critical thinking, our innate creativity to create or problem solve. I think that still exists. And what it does, in a similar way the Industrial Revolution helped with production, this maybe just helps with adding our own level of verification or value by using this as a tool to give us more. But if it gives everyone more, then we're the same. This idea that we're all using it. So you see it in LinkedIn posts, people who were writing one-liners now writing stories that are incredibly insightful, and you wonder how. And that's okay. That's cool. If it's sharing knowledge, then that's really powerful and we're all learning something new. But coming back to the idea that AI is taking jobs, I don't know that. I'm reading Pod Save America or listening to Offline with John Favreau, and I'm hearing a lot of his takes on AI, and it's quite interesting, right? It's scary. Like, it's really scary. But that's not my world. I own a design agency. We build apps, software, websites, etc. So we're also a technology company. We want to look at ways to use AI to build efficiency and support truth, align with our values of what we could build. But at the same time, you wonder what happens to these businesses over the next 3 to 5 years. Does it just take over the lot? You just don't know that. So what do? We just got to prepare and understand what our strengths and weaknesses are as individuals and what we can bring to the world, in the same way that the evolution of anything is sped up by capitalism. It's the same motivation for this. I heard yesterday that this idea that AI is the whole world's knowledge poured into a computer to give back that knowledge, it's ours, back to us, to everyone, who then pay for that knowledge to continue to feed it. But that knowledge is stealing away jobs from us. So it's this really weird cycle, in a similar way that circularity in socks creates this sort of hopefully positive outcome. This is creating an outcome that is relatively negative. It's good for me now, or good for you now, because we can get like this sort of superpower in our pocket to help us expand our thinking in a way that we couldn't 9 to 12 months ago. I find that quite interesting. I can just come back to the controllables about what I can control and what's within my wheelhouse about who I am and what I want to be, and bring that to my job every day, because we can't control the future. And that's part of the problem with creativity. It's unknown, so it's like, well, what do I need to do to be present now? What are the things I need to make now? What sort of business do I need to make now? Let's make some assumptions around the future that we don't really know. And again, it looks quite dystopian when you sort of, depending on which side of the Twitter feed you read. That's scary. But I think in terms of going back, one of the earlier things you were talking about was when I wrote my book, I started to write the book 4 or 5 years ago. Everyone told me that you'd never get published, right? Everyone. So from a human point of view, that was an impossible task for me, but I wrote it anyway. And at the end of it, I put it out to a bunch of publishers, and the first 2 publishers come back and said, we want to publish it. my manifestation around trying to stick to my values, write a book that was important to me, for me, with insights that hopefully added value for someone else, anyone who wanted to read it. I pictured at the start of writing it that it was in an airport on a table in Sydney or LA, and business people would walk past and pick it up and look at the cover and go, oh, that looks interesting, because hopefully we're good enough at design that we can get them to pick it up. And when they turn to a page, they read it and go, oh yeah, this is for me. The first week it came out, it was in Sydney Airport, Melbourne Airport, Gold Coast Airport. It's in Heathrow in London. It's in LA. It's in Barnes and Noble. So all these things that said wouldn't happen, did happen. And that's part manifestation, but it's also part of just doing the work irrespective of what is thrown at us, because the work matters. With AI, we're in the dip. There's heaps of opportunity given to us through AI, but it's the dip. It's the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen in this little valley of terrifying AI world. But all we can do is push on and be really good at the work we're going to do. I wrote about this book called The Last Policeman, and I read the online version really quickly, and I'm really obsessed with these 15-minute books. By the way, is a really bad way to read books, but I just find myself getting through the book that I look at and go, well, I probably should read that, and I'd like to, but I haven't got time. 15-minute version, and I love it. The Last Policeman was this guy on Earth as the world's dying and it's a dystopian future where everyone is scrambling. He decided to continue to do his job, to be a policeman and stick to his values, the same rules and the same things he always brought to it. When you read the book, it's quite powerful to see the world crumbling and everyone losing ethics. He just turned up, got dressed, went to work and did the exact same thing he's always done, because that's the thing that he was put on the earth to do. I thought that was a really powerful book. There's something really powerful. I loved it anyway. There's something in that for me.
Yeah, maybe you don't get to skip the dip with AI, because the meme right now is that before AI, it was 5 days of coding and 1 day of debugging. And now it's 1 day of AI writes all the code and then 5 days of debugging. And there wasn't any gain in productivity, because I could play around and make something that looks like a working piece of software or digital experience. But if I don't understand how it works, then that's the dip. It just moved the dip to the next phase. Like, okay, we'll get the project set up for you, do all the mundane stuff, get the files set up, best practices and code. But now it's like, oh, what's the best way to structure this? And what's the best way to store the data? And so the dip actually didn't go away. And now it's like having me consider, oh, what skills should I learn? Because now that AI let me skip the mundane basics, do I actually just go back and try to do it from scratch, or try to meet myself where I skipped with AI? I am very surprised at how little AI actually removes things from my life. Just because I can write a really good doc, if I don't understand the content of that doc, or there's a typo in there I don't agree with, or I don't know the content, and I go present it in a deck or something, and someone asks you a question, you're like, oh, I didn't consider that because I didn't struggle to create this story. Then it didn't automate anything.
Yeah, totally agree with you. AI came out right about the end of me writing my last 3 chapters of my book. And I was like, amazing. Let me just plug this in and it can write it for me. I'm exhausted of writing. My thumbs and fingers are going, all that enough of tapping away at a keyboard. And admittedly, I did do a lot of dictating into a phone and transcribing and then editing. But it was such a weird experience to think that this wasn't my words. So I used it as a coach. I used AI heavily in the execution of the book. Let's go back to the start. My first thought was, oh my God, this is going to finish it for me. I'm just going to tell it what to write and it's going to write it. And I found that to be absolutely impossible. My tone of voice changed, my writing style changed. I started to use words like wonderful day and things that I've never said in my life started to creep into my language on the page. So there was a real disconnect between me in the real world and the words on the page. And that was problematic. So where I found a great use for it was to use it as a coach and a sounding board. There's something really interesting when you're sitting in a room. I finished this book up in my friend's writing room in Byron Bay in far northern New South Wales. It's quiet up there. You're in nature and you're writing, and there's no one to, there's a real positive influence on my relationship with my wife where I can say to her, I'm stuck on this thing today and we can hash it out. And that's a positive back and forth. Writing, I didn't get that, and probably writing code, or like for me, I wanted to ask it to beat it up. Is the structure right? What am I missing? And then I would go back and fill that gap with my words. So I found a real good use of it as a coach, not an editor, because I was not wanting it to be that. I still needed this to be mine, but a sounding board to go, this making sense? Is anyone going to read this? I think they are. But then I actually found it was being too nice to me, just agreeing with you all the time. And that's a problem too. So I needed to give it some parameters to go, don't agree with me, beat this thing out, kick the shit out of this thing. I want you to tell me that this chapter doesn't make sense or it does. And so I found that really valuable, like a really valuable thing. And at the same time, I think we're putting a lot of emphasis on it, and rightly it's happening. It's happening. Craig Kelly, former founder of Wired magazine.
Kevin Kelly.
Kevin Kelly, sorry, yeah. I love listening to him talk about AI, and he's so optimistic about it in a positive way. And I take a lot away from his conversation with it. He's always been at the forefront of technology in such a positive way and tries to ensure that we're building things for good. I like his conversation around AI. He always says it's taking jobs, and he's like, whose job? Who do you know? And when he says that, I'm like, I don't know anyone yet who's lost their job from AI. I don't know, personally, but that's me. I'm sure there's hundreds of people who have and do know, but yeah, I don't know. I find his take quite interesting. I mean, what do you think? Well,
he's leaned into it. Like I think he does daily Midjourney.
Daily Midjourney, yeah.
Yeah, this comes back to design. Isn't that different from single-use plastics or unsustainable supply chains? Sometimes I'm like, there's no such thing as like a good or bad design. It's like there's healthy or unhealthy outcomes from the design, because you could have like a really efficient design, but it's not human-centered. It is effective at delivering the desired outcome at the expense of different stakeholders. Human-centered design means it's a good outcome while considering like the people that could have been impacted by it. I've done the similar thing. I primarily use Claude, and lately I've just been saying, hey, I'm trying to get to this outcome, but I want you to be the devil's advocate or be a journalist, interview me about this topic, because I wanted to source the content from me by interviewing me. And that's a lot of typing originally, but this one startup, Whisperflow, came out. And instead of being one of the many startups that are like, cool, we'll write your emails for you, your PRDs for you, or your strategy docs, it just said, hey, we're going to make it so that you can dictate into your microphone, and we'll use AI to clean up the grammar. When you talk into it, it's going to listen to your pauses and your implied punctuation in your voice. It essentially just removes the friction between you and typing, because Apple's dictation gets it wrong a lot, but this one, it has pretty reliable responses. And then I use that to interface in the computer, and I'm a neurospicy ADHD person that has a lot of knowledge in my head, and AI doesn't care if you rant at it or have coherent structure to your voice. And I find it to be one of the best uses of AI is where I could actually just talk to Claude, rant incoherently, like data dump into it. Claude helps punch up my thinking, and you give it the parameters to be kind of mean to you, but it's okay because it's not a person, so there's no interpersonal relationship to worry about. Yeah. I'd say those are two different design approaches. Write the document for me, or help me interface, like remove the friction so I don't have to use a keyboard to interface with a machine. Like removing friction, like between like a machine, like those are two different uses of like probably the same like OpenAI model, but like one design solution is more human-centered, and it helps me think better and be more creative. Yeah,
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with removing keyboards or talking to technology. It's like the evolution of the phone. Yeah, I'm okay with evolution and innovation. I think it's very cool that we can find a better use of the mouse. I come back to Dave Kelly from IDEO. The airline industry didn't have a light on a toilet door for 25 years until he sat on a flight one day and was like, I wonder if the toilet's free. And he'd get up and check, and there's someone in there, and he'd go sit down, he'd get up and check. And in that moment, he says, oh, maybe we should just put a light on the door if it's occupied or if not. No one had thought of that for 25 years. That's just a great efficiency because the guy doesn't need to get up. He can wait and see when the light's green or red. I think this design's really important. I think if our voice and talking to a computer is valuable for someone and it removes their inability to type at speed, I'm a great typer. I like typing. But I'm finding myself in my car now dictating all the time, which is removing typing. And then I'm going back and editing. So I'm creating an efficiency for myself. So this is what you're talking about sounds like a great tool. I like this use of technology. I think we can continually evolve and get better. I'm not saying human-centered design's bad. I'm just thinking that for my role is when you attach human-centered design to systemic design foundations, which is new, that's my framework, then we've just got to be aware of the implications of the systems and the places in which humans live and operate in the future, and try to understand that we want to create a better environment, a better planet for humanity, not a worse one, not a dystopian one. So that's the interesting thing for me. I remember taking this idea of systemic design foundations to the Institute of Design in Chicago. I took it to Curtin University in Sydney. I took it to Cameron Tonkin-Wise at University of Technology in Sydney. I said, I've got this idea, and it's forming into this type of a PhD type project around systems design. All those people came back to this conversation around transition design. Do you know transition design?
No, I don't.
So transition design is this idea of, we know where we need to get to in terms, use climate as an example. We know we need to get here. We need by 2030 or 2050, we got these targets. We know that there's better things than a wind farm. We know there's better things than solar. We just haven't built them yet. We don't know what they are yet. So the idea of solar or wind farms at sea is so not the answer. But from a transition point of view, they take us out of what is a problem now and transitions into something better to position us for hopefully finding the solution later. The transition design, and I'm not an expert in transition design, and if Cameron Tonkin-Wise ever listens to this, he's probably going to have a heart attack because I've explained it completely wrong. But we have a problem where I live. I can see the ocean. I love the ocean in the same way you probably love your mountains in Utah. If someone, as you're driving up the canyon, coming out of Sugar House up into the mountains, put 80 wind farms there, you'd probably have a problem with it, right?
Yeah.
They're putting an ocean the wind farms out in the sea. They're not called wind farms. I think we've got to rephrase our name for that. I can't recall what the new title is, but they put these giant energies to the generators out at sea, and you can see them 30 kilometers offshore. So of course the people who live here have a problem with it, irrespective of how important that is for the generation of energy or the removal of fossil fuels into hopefully transition into a better future. And there's a lot of positives to it that feeds into the local grid, energy gets cheaper. But at the same time, we're worried about whales, ocean. There's so many consequences potentially to these environments. It's not the end game, it's transition, because we don't know the end game. You know what I mean? So I'm really interested in transition design and trying to learn more about it. That's being talked about a lot, and a lot of universities are doing work on that. For me, it's more trying to understand the systems which are impacted through the transition.
It sounds very similar to an idea from the book, How Innovation Works. And it just talks about how innovation never was this lightning bolt moment. He treats innovation like evolution. The person that invented this thing got the idea from this person, and then that person got the idea from this person. And transition design just sounds like, okay, like based off our paradigms of how we understood the world, we came up with this solution. And then the next generation of like inventors and designers came up, and they're like, that was this, now that becomes the status quo. And then they iterate off that over longer time horizons. I mean, it's very similar to like, oh, flying cars. And then there's that Neil deGrasse Tyson quote where he just says like, we already have flying cars. And it's like, really? And it's like, yeah, they're called helicopters. That's what the flying car is. Like, but it was just like the paradigm shift of, we try to go like, oh, take the paradigm of a car, turn into a flying car. But if you look at the physics and the system of how air works, a different design makes a lot more sense. But before we, like, I want to make sure that I get to this one topic before our time ends for this interview. There was this one concept when we were talking before the episode. Why do we lose our creative confidence as we age? That's the question. Why do we lose creative confidence as we age?
I think 96% of kids are creative, 26% of adults agree. It's quite telling. And I think what happens is we move into jobs where we're told that creativity doesn't have a seat at the table. I was an executive for a big eyewear company, and the executive team was, I think, 12 people. It might have been 15. And we were all very functional. The finance director, the CEO, the sales director. There wasn't anyone in that role from design or creativity. There was maybe the marketing director, but had a broad team. I think that somehow we've just decided that creativity isn't, because we've misunderstood it. We think creativity is art. We think it's design. We think it's painting. We connect it with that. And it's actually not that. It's so much more than that. It's problem solving. It's the ability to wake up in the morning and step into bravery. If we put something in front of creativity, it's curiosity. A lot of people are interested in curiosity. We're curious people, but we're not always comfortably stepping into solving or following curiosity. And I'll give you a great example. I got invited to the launch of the Dolce & Gabbana nightclub.
Say more.
I'm 35, right? I'm working for a really big eyewear group, and one of the brands that they license is Dolce & Gabbana. So I'm in Milan and we get invited to the launch of their new nightclub that they built, which during the day was a restaurant and nighttime becomes a nightclub. And there's the Dolce & Gabbana, Stefano and Domenico. You got a picture, I'm 35 years old. I'm from Western Sydney. This is like being a little bit from, I don't know, maybe St. George in Utah. I'm a country west or Western Sydney
Yeah.
kid. I get to Milan. I go to this red carpet. There's cameras flashing. Ronaldo's there. Valentino Rossi is there, the motorbike rider. There's famous Italian actors who I don't know are there. And this is terrifying for me. This is the scariest environment I've ever been in my life. And I'm wearing an $80 suit from my local shopping center, a pair of $50 or $60 shoes called Julius Noah's that
In
you don't
Milan.
wear in Milan.
Yeah.
But that's all I had. So when I'm in there, I'm really scared. And there's a little voice on my shoulder going, you don't belong here. You didn't earn this. These are famous people. What are you doing here? You're a joker. Right. So these things are happening to me in my head when I'm there. I'm also trying to work out, how do I tell my friends from my own small town that this is what I do now? My solution to that is I'll steal the Dolce & Gabbana gold-plated knives and forks and I'll take them home and I'll show them that I was there and this is proof. This is quite a terrifying thought because it's easy now at 50 to look back and go, why wasn't I there? And just comfortable in the idea that I was there because I was invited. And the reason I was invited is because I made some really tough decisions in my career that moved me from this room to that room, from that room to this room. And the knife and fork are a metaphor in a way that I don't think I ever showed anyone, nor did I tell my mates, because I just didn't think that the knock around guys that I grew up with would understand that I was hanging out with that crowd. I remember it wasn't 2 years later that I was doing some work with Vashti Whitfield, who was a life coach for me. And she just looked at me and went, why? You should tell them. That was actually one of the reasons I wrote the book. I wanted to go back and understand why I felt that way. And coming back to creative confidence, someone had told me that I didn't deserve that. When I looked, joined the dots back, I started to realize that the reason I was there was because I was brave. Somewhere, at some point, I decided to take a job and then I decided to leave that job for a better one. Or I decided to write when everyone said, don't do it. When I wrote the book, everyone said, don't do it. You'll never get published. 70,000 people don't get published a year. Isn't a good enough reason not to write the book that I wanted to write under the assumption that it might. I think that's what happens. I feel like we get beat up or people tell us that we can't or we shouldn't. I'm going to start a business and people go, we probably shouldn't do that because someone's already done it. I like this idea that everything that's been made is the end point for our new beginning. You know, a pair of eyewear, a watch. If someone made it to that point, our job as designers is to be really respectful of that, but then take that and make it better. And make it better isn't making it more beautiful. It's making it more functional or making it more circular or putting it out into the world in a way that someone hadn't done prior. And that's our accountability. And that's what we're all put on the earth to do, is to take things and to bring things into community, society, health, whatever it is that is important to us, and to bring a piece of us that no one else can bring, which is reinventing or reimagining something that someone else did have the confidence to do. The reason we don't is fear. We're scared. But if we chase curiosity, that fear dissipates, it just goes away. And we step into this sort of idea that we're accountable for chasing curiosity to make the thing that we wanted to make. So that to me is my take on that. I don't know if I'm right. And this book wasn't a research academic book. It was a bunch of stories that I applied to my life to try and extract insight that could hopefully make sense of the world for myself and someone else.
Well, and it was your contribution, your point of view. I mean, there's a lot of books on creativity. You're not the first person I've interviewed about a book on creativity. I get the best knowledge on a topic when I read 5 books on the same subject from different authors. Then you're getting different angles on the problem. The economics of book publishing make it impossible to be comprehensive on broad topics. And so it's like, I have to fit my perspective in like 300, 500 pages, or they literally can't bind anything above it, like 1,000 pages. Brandon Sanderson's doing a great job, fantasy author, of pushing the limits on what is possible to get bind. But I really love that idea of just doing it. I think what stops us from being creative is that we think that we have to be novel, right? That there's so many ways to be creative. I mean, there's this great social media account I follow called Design Plus Excel, and this guy uses Excel as his creative medium to make these amazing dashboards. Confuse creativity with art, but we also confuse creativity with craft.
Yeah.
You think that if you're not painting or drawing or actually designing, like visually designing, you're not doing something crafty. Moving around your furniture in the house actually helps with how you feel when you're in your house. that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a mastery of craft involved or a traditional craft.
I totally agree. To me, the most creative act is being a parent.
Oh, yeah.
You think about that, right? So you're giving all the time. You don't get much back other than their joy or their learning or their development. I've got 3 kids, 21, 19, and 15, and they love me a lot. And I love them a lot. We're lucky that we're in a really connected home and we're all together. The most creative part of my life is watching them evolve their life because of my connection with them. So what can I give without any expectation of anything in return? That's a creative act. My sister-in-law moved to Australia. That is a creative act in a way that I've never been brave enough to do. I go to America and I'm looking forward to coming home because there's safety in that. When you move a country, and I just think that we do things, but we don't connect that with creativity, or she didn't know how to ride a bike and 2 years later she did a triathlon. That is so powerfully creative in the sense that you're stepping into bravery, stepping out into confidence, you're chasing something that you thought of going, oh, I'm not going to do that because it scares me. I remember going, triathlons are hard. He's from England. I love swimming in the ocean. In my book, I talk a lot about ocean swimming and what that gives me. She said, I want to go for a swim in the ocean. I want to swim. I'm going to do a triathlon in a year. So can you help me learn to ocean swim? So I said, of course. So we went down to a beach in Manly and Sydney and we jump in the water and I'm like, you have to swim around this little headland. It's about 800 meters. So what's that in feet? 1,300, 1,500 feet, maybe. I don't know. Though I actually have no idea what feet are to meters.
I mean, you're asking an American to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Like you're more likely to succeed than me.
So it's 800 meters. We get in the ocean and as we get about 200-300 meters off the shore, she goes into a mass panic attack because we realize there's no safety, no beach, no anything. She grabs me. I've done surf rescue. The worst thing someone panicking or drowning to do is grab someone. So I distance myself from her to say, lay on your back and just breathe. You're going to float. Lay on your back and float. She's looking at me going, oh, this is ridiculous. I can see she was in panic mode. So I said, Claire, just lay on your back. You're going to be okay. So she lays on her back and she floats and she realizes that she's completely safe out there and nothing's going to happen. Either we get calm, she realizes she's going to be okay. And I said, look how far you've come. Look how far we've got to go. It's not far. Let's just get to that end. Let's just keep going and we can go slow. So we go slow, we get to the other end. The look on her face is like nothing I can explain. It's intrinsic connection to a creative act that is powerful, that was scary, and she had to come all of that. Like she does Ironman events. An Ironman event now is a 180-kilometer bike ride. I think is it a 10-kilometer swim and a 42-kilometer marathon run at the end of it.
Yeah.
So to go from not being able to swim in the ocean and thinking you're going to drown 200 meters offshore, being that person, that's a choice. And that's the same thing we get to choose every day, whether it's I'm going to build the business, build the app, solve the problem, leave my job, do a better one. This is creativity.
It's choosing to not say I can't and doing it anyways. When I think about that example, she realized that she had to follow through. She did something very big and she can't retreat now. She has to follow through.
Right.
And the big scary stuff that gets you in the red carpet in Milan is that you started the design business. You got the accounts that you needed to build your reputation and clout. I don't think like if you get an account with Nike, you're like, I have to succeed here. I have to follow through because if not, I'm going to drown professionally. I can't just give up on this professional obligation. I have to follow through, do a good job. And I mean, there's so many projects in my career where you could just say, I'm not going to do the work. I don't feel good about this. And
you know,
do it anyways.
We've done work with Nike and someone said to me, you got your Nike logo on your website as a client. How come you haven't got the case study? I said, because it looks shit. Because it was so long ago now that it just looks really bad. We did the work, but times moved on and we've evolved. The idea of doing something then that didn't age means we just got to be better as an agency and go back and say, what can we do next time where that isn't the case? And that's where systemic design becomes important because we want something that lasts. And that's what systemic design is. It's considering that then we did something that they needed and now that we thought was good for the time and it just hasn't aged well. So I like this idea that we can fail, but at the same time, by not revisiting that, then that's all it is, but it can be a lesson too. So that's really important.
And you wouldn't have got that lesson unless you followed through and then put yourself out there.
That's right.
Is there anything that you feel needs to be said before? Do you feel like there is anything that needs to be said that hasn't been said? And how can people find your work?
I just love this conversation around creativity. I like the idea that technology is inherently creative. It's so important, the things we build. I think we undervalue that, how important it is. And I just like this idea that when we try to do work, we do work that matters. And what matters means that it has an impact on someone somewhere. I don't feel like we always equate those dots back to how important it is. We're just, speaking of Utah, we just got a contract with the Utah Jazz. We're doing this work in the US with the Jazz. And
All right.
it's community-focused work. If I go back to 2019, we were doing work for fossil fuel companies, for banks, for all these things, and we made a choice not to do that anymore. And that choice costs a lot of money, a lot of energy, a lot of risk. The clients that we've decided to work with since then, we've been brought into tenders with Climate United in the US. We've got a beautiful client in LA called Mediclo, which is just stunning, repurposed scrubs built from the earth. And so the choice to step away from that pre-2020 business to go, we don't do that anymore, that was attached to a set of values. And to step into new work, which we thought we'd never get, we did get. And that's scary and hard. And I'm not pretending for a second this business is easy. This is hard. My wife and I and 3 kids, we still sit down at night and go, this is tough. There's challenges with this. We've got this thing coming up. How are we going to tackle it? I'm not pretending here that we're sitting here as this success story. The book wasn't a self-help book. The book is a set of stories where hopefully you can see yourself in some of those stories. The work that we do is really important. I wished we made more money. I wish I was better at scaling and building this business that was like audio. I haven't worked out how to do that yet, and that's what I'm trying to do. Part money, part capitalism, but also part impact. I want to do really important work. People in positions of power, and that is people who make things, whether it's an app, technology, a brand. These are all influential things that change people's lives in a small way. And I just think we undervalue that. And that's important for me, is to come back to how important the work we do is. And that's my takeaway.
Yeah. I think that's a challenge of anyone that starts out in a creative field, avoiding the disciplines of scaling. I don't want to be an executive because the people that are good at it seem soulless and compromising of like values. But there's also just a lot of great business leaders that like took the leap and saw the business as a creative act themselves. Brian Chesky's the perfect example. He's one of less than 5 Fortune 500 designer CEOs. It really makes you think that if we chose to expand the medium we wanted to create, like he says he designs businesses. Ben, we're a little over time. I appreciate you taking what time to land the plane here. How can people find your work? How can people find your book? And we'll wrap up there. I can keep talking, but I want to respect your time.
No, that's fine. Like in the US, the book is in Barnes & Noble, Target, and Amazon. In Australia, we've got the book in all majors. We had a really good response to the book. I think creativity is a really important topic, especially with the rise of AI. We had a really good response. In the UK, it's in WH Smith, and New Zealand, it's in Woodcool. So we had a really, amazing response to the book. And you can find my work just at benrennie.com, and that will link to my studio, our studio. You'll see a bunch of projects, and I write a lot on Medium as well in Substacks. But benrennie.com will get you there.
All right, Ben, thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
Hey listener, thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.